Oh, the speed pledging? I really need to publish that because so many people have asked me about that. Okay, so what was going on in the church at the time was the stock market had crashed by about 50%. We lost all of our young adult members. They all had to move to find a job. Beyond that, many people had also lost their jobs. And we had people who were retired who moved from the area to live someplace cheaper. So we lost, in an 85-member church, lost 15 members in the course of 2 years. That's a huge hit. And one of those pledges was $5,000. And so we knew that was going to be hard to recover from. Now, as it turned out, we didn't take as big a hit as we thought because a lot of the young adults did pledge a lot of money. But it was still a huge emotional impact on the congregation. And we were afraid that they weren't going to be able to afford me. A 70-member church, can they afford a full-time minister? And I wanted them to be okay with that. You know, if that's the outcome, that we'll work with it. It'll be enough whatever it is. And so we had this meeting to sort of problem solve around this. And I really underestimated the anxiety about all of this, and it erupted into a huge fight. Huge fight. And it's like, okay, I really needed to not let that be so loosely run. It needed to be more directly facilitated. So I learned something then. And then people started coming up with different ideas that were more not healthy ideas, not healthy ones. And so I thought, if I'm going down, I'm going out with a bang. I'm going out with a bang. If I'm not going to be here, I'm going out with a bang. So the finance team strategized on how can we make it fun, because it's very stressed. People are stressed out. How can we make this fun? How can we get people to talk one-on-one about money? So it was a very pastoral approach, and and still ask. And still ask. And so at this time we didn't have a building, and I had my office behind the coffee shop, and they had a speed dating thing going on one night, and I thought, I'm going to do speed pledging.
Does everybody know what speed dating is?
Well, what you do in speed dating is you hook up with a person one-on-one for 5 minutes. You get a 5-minute date, a bell rings, and you move on to another partner, and you talk about something else. And you get to meet a bunch of different people and talk for just a few things. But to keep the conversation from going just superficial, we used appreciative inquiry questions. We had questions before that, and then Sharon went to Joan's workshop, and she came back. Sharon said, we got to do appreciative inquiry. And so we tweaked it, and it was really, we came up with 7 really great questions. So we did 7 different pairings of people, and then we had people moving around with music, and the team took it over. It was, my idea, but the team really just went to town with it, had fun. And now, I hadn't read Ask, Think, Tell. So if I had read that book, I would have known about these generational differences and the over 80 crowd. They still needed their wine and cheese party and the budget, and to be told, I'm a steward, I'm John Wayne here, tell me what I need to do. I still needed to do that, and we didn't. But beyond it, so we had to do a little legwork around that. But there was so much energy that was going on in the room, and the few naysayers had to admit that it worked, and people gave generously, and we also used a resource that Joan had sent out about giving in poor economic times, and so we encourage people to pledge where they're at right now. So you might be afraid of losing your job, but if you have a job right now, pledge how you can now, and then if you can't honor that and you lose your job, it's okay. We're going to adjust it. And so that's happened a few times. It happens every year, whether you give that permission or not. And so that culture, that environment, that shift in how we talk to people really worked. At the end of the 7 questions in their appreciative inquiry, they asked about what you value about the church, what your dreams and hopes were. There was just an introductory question to get to know people. There's one other. Do you remember what it was? There's 4 different ones.
Why do you come to church?
Yeah. That kind of thing. And it's like, what are you hoping to get to? And so you really go immediately to the heart of what you're tied to. And it was fun, and it was stupid. I mean, we had a big bell, and it was rung, and then there was a thermometer. It was one of those years the thermometer actually made sense, and people did hearts, and it was just, very first grade. But it worked. At the end of the pairing, we had people pick whoever they wanted to get together, gave them the pledge form, and they asked for money.
Okay, that was my question. Mechanically, when did you ask for money?
That night.
You did all the exclusion of interest.
Right. We withheld dessert, though. So, so we started off with dinner. I just did a grace. My entire thing, other than the canvas sermon itself, was to just grace, to offer grace. We ate a potluck, and then the chair said 5-minute pitch on why we're doing this, and then we went into the questions, and then we had dessert, and then we had people to pledge, and so it was good. We made up all that money, and I got a big raise that year.
It was the best canvas we ever had.
Yeah.
It was the best canvas we ever had.
We did it too, and probably I got your materials
Mhm.
to structure ours around, but what inspired it for me and what is relevant to this conversation is that training the stewards. When we trained stewards, we had them pledge each other as a practice one another.
Yes.
And I was sitting in that room at that point, listening to the excitement build and the sharing, and it's not just one-on-one where it's just this, little isolated event, but it built. And that was sort of our vision for taking it further. And it was, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was great, successful pledge drive, but it was a wonderful event for building community and letting you know that your part is much bigger.
Yeah.
It's a cool thing to do. It's a little complicated.
It is a little complicated, but I mean, the team really just took it over, and they told people what to do, and it just worked.
Were the parents totally random, or was there any guidance in that? And what kind of a physical space? How did
It was like a musical chairs. And so we had 2 lines of chairs facing each other. And so if I had a chair here, I would sit across from Carmen, and I'd say, it's Sunday morning, there's a newspaper in your hand, and there's a cup of coffee. Why do you go to church? Well, I know, she's a minister. So she kind of has to. But it's that kind of thing. And so we talk about that, and then I respond back. I'm a minister too, so I got to show up. And then there's music, and so we're walking around these chairs, and then the bell rings, and we sit. And so now I'm talking. What's your name? Judy. I'm talking with Judy, and it's what do you value about the church? And so then you're going to respond to me, and then I respond back.
So each pairing had a different question.
Each pairing had a different question, and all that stuff is on the OMD website. So if you need to look up those questions, it's there.
Chris, there was one other guideline we had, and that was that you couldn't do this appreciative inquiry with your spouse or your partner.
Yeah.
So that was the only thing.
Yeah. Toward the end, it got a little complicated finding someone you hadn't talked to, but I mean, people worked it out.
Chris, did
Let's make this the last question, okay? Go ahead.
each person ask the other person when they did this?
Yes.
For both questions?
Both. So the same question, each answered it.
Yeah.
Okay. That was all marvelous presentation, Chris, and a lot of great content.